Let's get to another part of the world now. Astor Piazzolla, the son of Italian parents, was born on 11th March 1921 in Argentina. His parents spoiled him very much. He was born with a deficiency in his left leg, in which he had to have 7 operations. His parents didn't have any more children because they were worried that they would have been born with the same health problems. Piazzolla was bullied because of his leg and hated being called lame. The family moved to New York when he was 4. They were very poor. Yet in 1929, his father got him a bandoneon from a rental shop and took him twice a week for lessons to Erik Schumann in the Bronx. Astor had a very close relationship with his father, called him Nonino, and his father did everything for him to feel very special. Later, in 1933, he began to study piano with Bella Wilde, a student of Rachmaninoff. In 1939, Astor went to a piano recital of the great master Arthur Rubinstein at the Théâtre Cologne and brought him one of his compositions dedicated to him. Rubinstein looked at the score and told him, "This can't be a concerto, because you forgot about the orchestration." But Rubinstein immediately saw the talent in Piazzolla and sent him to study composition with Ginastera. In 1942, he married Dede Wolf, from whom he had 2 children, Danielle and Diana. Dede was a painter who encouraged Piazzolla to devote himself entirely to music. He decided to stop studying bandoneon and dedicated himself to writing and studying music. In 1953, he won the Fabian Sawicki Prize for the Buenos Aires Symphony with the scholarship to study orchestration in Paris. He went to France to study with the famous Nadia Boulanger, teacher of the greatest composers and musicians of that time. She was like a mother to him, as he said about her. She was a very strict teacher, so he studied a lot every day. He would play his compositions for her, and she was not convinced by them. Once she told him, "I don't see anything of Piazzolla in this music. Who is Piazzolla?" And he replied to her, "I am a bandoneon player." And she said with humor, "Ah, it's the only instrument poor Hindemith couldn't play." Then she would ask him to play tango for her and shout out of excitement that, "This is Astor Piazzolla." From that moment, Piazzolla never stopped playing the bandoneon. When he was 47, he fell in love again for a singer, Amelita Baltar, and left his wife, and wrote many pieces, including his opera Maria de Buenos Aires for her. Around 1960, he suffered from the older generation of bandoneon players, who called him a murderer, degenerate, defamed him, insulted him, and called him a communist. He was shocked. "Because of that, they call me a communist? I just changed tango." And all this was because Piazzolla made innovations in rhythm, timbre, and harmony, with a bit of inspiration from Bach, Stravinsky, and Bartók. When Piazzolla returned from New York, you could see the influence of jazz in his works, establishing a new language. He revolutionized tango, Nuevo Tango. He took the Argentine folk music from dance floors to concert halls around the world. Libertango is one of the pieces that shows the compositional freedom on which Tango Nuevo was based. Let's listen to a bit of this piece. Another famous composition of his is Adios Nonino, composed after his father's death. He said, "When I wrote that melody, maybe I was surrounded by angels." But now let's get to our autumn theme. Piazzolla composed Cuatro Estaciones Porteñas, four seasons of Porteñas. Porteño is referring to those who were born in Buenos Aires. These pieces are tangos and for a cabaret band. As he was the king of tango, remember, the pieces were composed by his quintet: violin, piano, guitar, double bass, and bandoneon. In 1965, Piazzolla began composing summer. In 1969, he composed winter, and in 70, he composed autumn and spring. Just listen to this autumn piece from a revolutionary composer who chose to make the difference without fear from his enemies. let's get to one of the most controversial and influential figures in music, art, and philosophy in the second half of the 20th century, John Cage. We could talk so much about him as there are so many books and articles about him and his philosophy. Cage as a composer is a difficult subject. Is he or is he not? That's the question. Is he a composer or is he a philosopher? Did he take us to a devious path or did he open up many possibilities for us? Let's see if we could answer these questions at the end of this episode. As he was a lecturer at universities, his lectures turned into books. He has about 6 books, which the first one is Silence, Lectures, and Writings. And because of this, we know a lot about him and how he thought. I will quote many things from him which I think maybe he can explain his ideas better. John Cage was born in 1912 in Los Angeles. Just by knowing a bit about his parents, you get to understand him a bit better. His mother, Greta Harvey, played the piano. She was a journalist at Los Angeles Times. His father was an inventor. That explains a lot about him. You can imagine the dinner conversations at his house. He wanted to become a writer, but he left the university because he thought he could learn better by himself. He said, I was shocked at the college to see 100 of my classmates in the library all reading copies of the same book. Instead of doing as they did, I went into the stacks and read the first book written by an author whose name began with Z. I received the highest grade in the class. That convinced me that the institution was not being run correctly. I left. So he goes to Europe hitchhiking. He studied Gothic architecture and Greek, but he dropped it. As well, then he went to poetry and painting, and at the end, music. In Europe, he heard more modernists like Stravinsky and Hindemith, and only later on he heard Bach. He wanted to come back to the US, but his parents insisted that it's good for him to stay in Europe a bit longer. So after all this traveling, in Palma de Mallorca, he started composing. Cage studied compositions with Henry Cowell, who suggested Arnold Schoenberg to Cage. Cage couldn't afford the lessons. So Schoenberg asked him if he would devote his life to music. Cage said yes, so then Arnold offered his lessons for free. A composer who Cage had so much admiration for and got very much influenced by him. Cage mentioned later on, after I had been studying with him for 2 years, Schoenberg said, in order to write music, you must have a feeling for harmony. I explained to him that I had no feeling for harmony. He then said that I would always encounter an obstacle, that it would be as though I came to a wall through which I could not pass. I said, in that case, I will devote my life to beating my head against that wall. When they asked Schoenberg about the talents of his American students, first he said, there are none. But later he corrected himself by saying, there was one. Of course, he's not a composer, but he's an inventor, a genius. Cage liked this title of inventor for himself, like a father, like a son. He also was inspired by Oskar Fischinger, animator and painter who told Cage that everything in the world has a spirit that can be released through its sound. Later on, he mentioned what music was to him. When I hear what we call music, it seems to me that someone is talking. And talking about his feelings or about his ideas of relationships. When I hear traffic, the sound of traffic, here on 6th Avenue, for instance, I don't have the feeling that everyone is talking. I have the feeling that sound is acting, and I love the activity of sound. I don't need sound to talk to me. Many of his earlier pieces are for percussion or percussive. He used the piano as a percussion instrument. He was very much interested in East Asian philosophy, Indian philosophy, and Zen Buddhism. In 1940, he composed sonata and variations for prepared piano, which means he put some screws or other items inside the piano, on the strings, and created other sound from piano. You could say it sounds a bit like Indonesian Yavanse gamelan instruments. Let's listen to a bit of this sonata. Around 1942, he moved to New York. He was surrounded by so many artists like Pete Mondrian, Andre Breton, Jackson Pollock, and Marcel Duchamp. He and his wife stayed with Max Ernst and Peggy Guggenheim for free, and she helped him very much and organized a concert at her gallery. But after he had an event in MoMA, Museum of Modern Art, she took away all her support. And like this, he became homeless with no job and with no money in his pocket. Maybe all these troubles affected his marriage and ended up in divorce. He kept writing for prepared piano and for the dance performances, which was beginning of a friendship with the choreographer Merce Cunningham, and continued to an association of modern dance and later on became his lifetime romantic partner. That's how Cage is such a big influence on modern dance. One of his popular pieces of this time, which was immediately performed by Kathy Berberian and Luciano Berio, is The Wonderful Widow of 18 Springs for a singer and closed piano. Let's listen to it.
Night, by silent sailing night, peace of earth, wildwood's eyes and primrose air, quietly, all the woods so wide, in moves of moss and daphne dews.
I think in this time, artists were more united and helped each other more than now. He made important friendship in New York, like the pianist Greta Sultan, who performed many of his piano pieces, and his friendship with Earl Brown, David Tudor, and Christian Wolff was referred to as the New York School. Around 1950, he became very interested in I Ching, a Chinese classical text. I Ching is a system that has been used to predict the future, a book of wisdom. It is easy to read, yet elegant, profound, and intuitive. It is often consulted for its advice and insight into human nature. Cage used the I Ching for composing. One of the first results is Imaginary Landscape, number 4, for 12 radios. In this period, he was elaborating his method of composition, chance music. In a 1957 lecture, Experimental Music, he described music as a purposeless play. which is an affirmation of life, not an attempt to bring order out of chaos, nor to suggest improvements in creation, but simply a way of waking up to the very life we are living. Among his compositions, we can hear the use of everyday objects, the sound of the environment, which we were so called happenings. Cage music every time sounds different, never the same way. Happenings were an art form established by Cage and his students in the late 1950s. Cage's experimental composition classes at the New York have become legendary as an American source of fluxus, an international network of artists, composers, and designers. In 1952, he composed his most famous piece, Silent, 4 minutes 33 seconds, which you probably have heard about. A piece in 3 movements for piano, in which the musician doesn't play a single note. A silent piece. There are many books and articles about this philosophy, which I'm not going into, but the basic ideas were to make people listen to the surrounding sounds, to the sound of our environment and the sound of our own body, our heart. The public's behavior and reaction became the music. Let's not listen to it now. Please listen to this piece silent only after this episode finishes. Now I would like to recite part of his poetry and communication for you. Is communication something made clear? What is communication? Music. What does it communicate? Is what's clear to me clear to you? Is music just sounds? Then what does it communicate? Is a truck passing by music? Are sounds just sounds or are they Beethoven? People aren't sounds, are they? Is there such a thing as silence? Even if I get away from people, do I still have to listen to something? Say, I'm off in the woods. Do I have to listen to a stream babbling? Is there always something to hear, never any peace and quiet? If my head is full of harmony, melody, and rhythm, what happens to me when the telephone rings? To my peace and quiet, I mean. And if it was European harmony, melody, and rhythm in my head, what has happened to the history of, say, Javanese music with respect, that is to say, to my mind? Are we getting anywhere asking questions? Are we going? Is this the 28th question? Are there any important questions? Would we ever be able to get so that we thought the ugly sounds were beautiful? If we drop beauty, what have we got? Have we got truth? Do I have to know when to stop? Is this the one chance we have to be alive and ask a question? How long will we be able to be alive? According to his wishes, Cage's body was cremated and his ashes scattered in the Ramapo Mountains near Stony Point, New York, at the same place where the ashes of his parents were. The composer's death occurred only weeks before a celebration of his 80th birthday organized in Frankfurt by composer Walter Zimmermann and musicologist Stefan Schedler. The event went ahead as planned, including a performance of the concert for piano and orchestra by David Tudor and Ensemble Modern. Many composers were attracted to chants music for several reasons: for being very different from tradition, or they were interested in Asian philosophical point of view, like Zen Buddhism, and some others wanted to give more freedom or influence to the performer. While you are thinking about whether Cage is a composer or not, is he worthy of the name? His influence on countless composers, artists, and writers are undeniable. After Cage introduced chance music, Boulez, Stockhausen, and Xenakis remained critical, and at times got bullied by not getting any jobs. Yet all adopted chance style in some of their works. Stockhausen piano writing in his later works, Klavierstück, was influenced by Cage's music of chance. Other people to mention who were influenced by Cage are Helmut Lachenmann and Rauschenberg. Even Radiohead undertook a composing and performing collaboration with Cunningham's Dance Company in 2003 because the leader of the group, Tom York, considered Cage one of his all time art heroes. The piece that we are going to listen to, and of course is related to autumn, is The Seasons. The Seasons was a ballet commissioned by Lincoln Kirstein for the New York Ballet Society. It was premiered in 1947, choreographed by Cage's partner, Merce Cunningham. This is the first piece used in a gamut technique by Cage. The seasons are built on Indian aesthetic concepts of seasons. Winter represents quietness and dormancy. Spring represents creation. Summer represents preservation. And autumn represents destruction. The ballet is in one act, divided into 9 sections: prelude, winter, prelude, spring, prelude, summer, prelude, fall, and finale. The finale is a repetition of the first prelude, representing the fact that the seasons are cyclical. Let's listen to fall and finale. And that's it for this episode. We hope that you enjoyed this one. If you are still not convinced to listen to our classical repertoire in autumn, then listen to some good old jazz, like Autumn Leaves. You know what? Let's listen to it now together. Here it goes.